Hi, Kyle Thomas here, and in this video I'm going to show you guys how to install Linux into a virtual machine, and we're going to be using VMware to make the virtual machine. I used to use VirtualBox, but it's been giving me some problems lately, so I switched to VMware. And for the Linux distribution, Linux Mint's one of my favorites, so we're going to use that one. It's very user-friendly, or very beginner-friendly. So to get VMware, we're going to go to vmware.com. And it was a little hard to find the downloads page, but to do so you go to products, and it's right here under workstation player. If you're on Mac, you need the Fusion for Mac, but I'm not familiar with that. I don't know if it's the same or if it's a lot different. So once you go to the workstation player, you go to the download now tab, and then we want the one for Windows. You'd be a little backwards if you're on Linux trying to download Windows for this video. And once you download it, I'm not going to go over how to install it because it's pretty straightforward. You just follow the prompts. So while that's downloading and installing, go ahead and go to linuxmint.com and go to the downloads tab. And for this video, I'm going to be doing the Cinnamon desktop environment. It's the most modern, and it's the one I'd recommend using. And then I'm going to do 64-bit. If your computer's 32, you want 32-bit. But also to use 64-bit, you need to make sure that in your BIOS settings that hardware virtualization is enabled for your processor. Otherwise, 64-bit won't show up in the pull-down tabs for later. And so then on this page, if you use torrents and you know what they are, go ahead and click on this one to open the torrent. Otherwise, this is just a list of different servers that have the files on it that we need. So go ahead and just select any one from your country and it should work. I've already downloaded it, so I'm not going to do it again. But once we have it downloaded and we have VMware opened up, then we're going to go ahead and make the virtual machine. So we go create a virtual machine, and it wants to know where you're going to get the installation file from, and that's this thing we downloaded right here from Linux Mint. So you're going to choose installer disk image, and you're going to navigate to that one, and then go next. And now it wants to know what kind it is. It automatically selected Linux, and you'll see it says Ubuntu 64-bit. This is a pull down menu where it won't say 64-bit if your system's not 64-bit or if you don't have that option enabled in your BIOS. And so you'll notice it doesn't say Linux Mint in this pull down menu, but that's okay because Linux Mint's a derivative of Ubuntu, so Ubuntu 64-bit is just fine. And so go ahead and go next, and it asks what you want to name it. This is just for your bookkeeping purposes, and Ubuntu is a little bit of a silly name because it's not Ubuntu we're installing, it's Linux Mint, so I'd go ahead and call it something different. And then this is the location. It's going to put the virtual machine files in. Go ahead and just leave the default. And then right here it wants to know how big of a virtual hard drive we're going to have. If you're just using the virtual machine to play around with, then 20 gigs is just fine. If you're going to use it for installing a lot of software and for putting videos on, you might want more. 20 gigs would probably be the minimum though. And then for this one, it looks like it says keep it into multiple files if you're going to move it around a lot, but it also says it can reduce performance. I'm not sure how this affects solid state drives, but we'll just go ahead and leave it as the default. And this is just a summary of what the machine's going to have. So before we go finish, we're going to customize the hardware just a little bit more, because 2 gigs of RAM's not that much. Linux doesn't need that much RAM, so 2 gigs will work. But I'd go, if your system has a lot of RAM and can spare it, you want at least 4, and probably no more than 8 depending on what you're doing if you're just using it. And again, this depends on how much RAM your system has as well. And then we also want to go over here and give it at least 2 processor cores. Virtual machines are a lot slower than running the operating system natively, and the smoother you can make it, the better. It's really frustrating when it's lagging. And so after that, go ahead and go finish. And we can see the machine right here, and it tells us the state, the operating system, and the version and how much memory it's got. So you can either go here to run it, it calls it play, or you can go up here. Either one works. And now you can see it's starting to boot up. Okay, and now that it's booted up, as you can see, it's got a desktop and icons. This is a fully working operating system right now, but it's just a live boot off of this ISO, so any changes you make aren't going to persist across reboots, so we still need to actually install it. But first, I'm going to make the resolution a bit bigger because that way you guys aren't staring at a tiny box. And it doesn't have my native resolution on here, so I'm going to have to make it, it's not going to quite be the full screen, but it'll be close. Okay, and so now, oh, that was a little too big. Okay, so now we're gonna go ahead and install it. So we go here to install Linux Mint. And while it's installing, you can actually still play around with the operating system. It's got a bunch of applications already on it by default that you can go ahead and use. So choose your language and hit continue. And then for your keyboard layout, as you can see, they have a lot of different keyboard layouts, even per language. And if you need to, you can go ahead and test your keyboard layout in here. And then, so this one, it wants to know if you want to install third-party software. Some people only like open source software on their system. I don't really care. I need software that works. So if you want Flash and MP3s and stuff like that to work out of the box, you want to go ahead and check that box. Okay, so this screen, it looks a little intimidating. Erase disk and install Linux Mint, but this isn't your actual hard drive. This is just the virtual hard drive we created earlier, the 20 gigabyte one. So you actually do want to erase disk and install Linux Mint. You can encrypt it for security, or I'm not sure what logical volume management is, so I'm not going to go over that, but encrypting the virtual machine, you might want to do that if you're using it for sensitive things, but we're just using it to play around with in this video, so I'm not going to bother. If you're going to dual boot Linux with Windows on your actual hard drive, then you'd want to go into something else and actually make partitions for Windows and Linux to coexist together. But again, that's out of the scope of this video, so we're just going to go erase disk and install Linux Mint. And so right here is a summary of the changes. And again, since it's just a virtual hard drive, there's not much going on. But if you're dual booting, you'd really want to go over this screen and make sure everything's exactly how it should be. If you make a mistake, you can wipe Windows out and have to start over. Okay, so in this screen, this is mostly just for your time zone information. So I'm in Pacific Standard Time, so I'm just going to leave it as LA. Go ahead and choose your time zone, or you can type in your actual location if you wanted to, and hit continue. And so it wants to know who you are. For my virtual machines, I always do root to play on. The admin on Linux is called the root user, and Groot from Guardians of the Galaxy is a lot like root, so it's just being silly. The computer name, you can name it whatever you want. Don't put underscores apparently. And username, you can put your last name, but again, this is just a virtual machine, so it doesn't matter. And it wants a password. And again, a virtual machine, you can probably tell it just to log in automatically, or I'm just going to have it require the password just to show you guys what the login screen of Linux looks like. And really crappy password, just root backwards. That's the default password for Kali Linux is root backwards. It's kind of funny. A very secure password. Definitely make your passwords just your username backwards. And so now it's actually installing Linux. If you want, you can click on this button and you can see the actual output. I don't know what any of that means, and I don't know if really anyone knows what that means. So while it's installing, you get the slideshow you can go through, and it just shows you some featured apps and things you can do. So you can go ahead and play around with that while it's installing, or you can go explore the apps it has. Not sure if there's anything too interesting to show you guys right now. But just remember, any changes you make here, like if you go change the colors of your folders, that's not going to be the same, because when it's done installing, you're going to restart, and then you'll be actually booted into Linux. And then, so that's all there is to installing it, and I'll see you in the next video for how to use it.